American sanctions are working to cripple Iranian-backed militias. That's the word from the State Department tonight, where officials shared newly declassified intelligence exclusively with Fox News. This as Pentagon officials announced more U.S. troops are headed to the Middle East in what they call a response to Iranian aggression. We have Fox team coverage. Lucas Tomlinson from the Pentagon with a look at the number of troops being added to those already in the Persian Gulf. But we begin with State Department correspondent Rich Edson with a look at evidence the administration believes shows Iranian-backed terrorist groups scrambling now to find more money. Good evening, Rich.
Hi, good evening, Brad. And officials say there's evidence of it across the Middle East and that these militias are much weaker thanks to American efforts to strangle their revenue streams.
Donation boxes, budget cuts, social media campaigns featuring children in fatigues to raise money. State Department officials say newly declassified intelligence shared exclusively with Fox News shows Iran-backed militias across the Middle East are strapped for cash.
When people talk about Iran's regional aggression, they're talking about Iran's support for its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen. We are making it harder for all of these terrorist organizations to operate.
The State Department credits 26 rounds of American sanctions against nearly 1,000 targets. Officials say intelligence shows Iran has warned Shia militia groups to find new revenue sources. Hamas has enacted austerity plans to address less funding from Tehran. Iran's cyber command needs money. And a fuel shortage in Syria, as the U.S. has cut off 1 to 3 million barrels of oil a month that Iran once supplied to the Assad regime. A year ago, the Trump administration withdrew from the Iran nuclear agreement. That meant restoring sanctions on Iranian exports, banking, and oil. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has warned his country will begin producing highly enriched uranium in less than 2 months if European governments fail to shield Iran from these American sanctions.
The enemy has attacked us once again. Today, it's through economic warfare and attacking people's lives and welfare.
India and Turkey, two of the last countries importing Iranian oil, have announced this week they're finished buying oil from Iran. Democrats in European governments, still part of the nuclear deal, have criticized the Trump administration's withdrawal from it, saying it would further destabilize an already volatile region and encourage Iran to restart its nuclear program. The U.S. says it's playing the long game.
The president would like to get into negotiations with the Iranian regime so that he can put in place a new and better deal to replace the failed Iran nuclear deal. But while we're working on that objective, we're also denying Iran the revenue it needs to destabilize the Middle East.
Iran's president has rejected negotiations with the United States, saying the current situation between the two countries is not suitable for talks. He says Iran's only choice is resistance. Brett?
Rich Edson live at the State Department. Rich, thanks. Now for a look at how many more troops will be headed to the Middle East, we turn now to Lucas Tomlinson with that story from the Pentagon.
The added firepower includes an Air Force fighter squadron to beef up the U.S. military's presence in the Middle East and to send a message to Iran, which senior Pentagon leaders call a very active threat. Roughly 1,500 more troops will deploy in the coming days. Some are already in the region. President Trump approved the deployments.
We want to have protection. The Middle East, we're going to be sending a relatively small number of troops, and we'll see what happens. It'll be about 1,500 people.
Pentagon officials announced today they have a high degree of confidence Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard was responsible for planting mines on 4 oil tankers outside the Persian Gulf this month. It's proxies for a rocket attack near the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, but declined to offer proof. It's this latest intelligence assessment prompting additional forces. Senior U.S. defense officials say the moves are in response to Iran's aggressive behavior and not an attempt to provoke them. The Democratic House Armed Services Committee chairman disagrees. Quote, adding more personnel and mission systems seems unwise and appears to be a blatant and heavy-handed move to further escalate tensions with Iran. The new American forces are not going to Iraq or Syria, but will join some of the 80,000 U.S. service members already deployed to the Middle East. The Pentagon will not disclose where reinforcements are heading. Roughly 600 of the additional U.S. troops are already in the region, part of a Patriot anti-aircraft missile battalion who will now be extended and not return home as planned. Additional forces also include combat engineers and more surveillance aircraft, both unmanned drones and manned reconnaissance aircraft to keep better tabs on Iran. The Trump administration is expected to bypass Congress and rush billions of dollars in new weapons to Gulf allies, countries long at odds with Tehran. Brett.
Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon. Lucas, thanks. The Dow finished ahead 95 points today. The S&P 500 was up 4. The Nasdaq closed up 9 points. For the week, the Dow was down nearly 0.75%. The S&P 500 was off more than 1%. The Nasdaq was off 2.25%. One congressman blocked an attempt to pass $19 billion in disaster aid ahead of the Memorial Day weekend. Texas Republican Chip Roy said he objected to the bill because members of Congress were not in town to vote on it. He also said the package should include money for the Department of Homeland Security to address immigration issues at the southwest border. The Senate approved the measure Thursday, and President Trump signaled that he would sign it despite a lack of funding for border security and his objections over the funding in the legislation for Puerto Rico. Now, after Congressman Roy's objection, this passage is delayed. The House will take up the measure again in early June. Nearly 43 million people are traveling this holiday weekend. 43 million. That's the second highest number on record since the year 2000. But Memorial Day plans may be hampered with the ongoing threat of tornadoes, flooding, and a heat wave some are calling a, quote, death ridge. Correspondent Matt Finn reports from Jefferson City, Missouri, tonight, where residents are still dealing with the aftermath of this week's deadly storms.
In Jefferson City this evening, the painful task of cleanup and assessing what can be salvaged for those who are in the path of the powerful tornado that ripped through the capital city.
I was laying on the floor and I had a hold of the side of the tub and then I watched as the roof got ripped off.
This young mother tells Fox News she's grateful her children were not home when she dropped to her tub, screaming and praying.
Sweet God, I'm gonna die. Like, don't let me die.
Next door, the majority of homes on this street were obliterated. How do you feel looking at this neighborhood?
It's overwhelming, but all we can do is do what we can each day and get through it.
Heading into the holiday weekend, large portions of the country are facing more extreme weather. The Army Corps of Engineers tells Fox News it's very concerned about more rain across the Midwest and Southern Plains. Near St. Louis, the Mississippi River hitting a flood stage of 38 feet, now closed, bringing holiday recreation and commerce to a halt. And now an extreme heat pattern experts call Death Ridge, the opposite of a polar vortex, is forecasted to potentially shatter heat records from Alabama to Virginia.
And Brett, happening right now, just blocks away from Missouri's Capitol building, these crews have been working at a stunning pace trying to replace damaged utility poles. And right here, this building that you could see inside of, neighbors tell us they expect it to collapse at any moment. Brett.
Matt Finn, live in Jefferson City. Matt, thank you. Up next, in an emotional speech, British Prime Minister Theresa May makes her resignation official. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 35 in Orlando, where SpaceX launched 60 little satellites from Cape Canaveral late Thursday. The launch is the first of thousands that founder Elon Musk plans to put in orbit for global internet coverage. Musk said today the satellites are already online a few hundred miles above Earth. Fox 6 in Milwaukee, where late this afternoon, a Wisconsin man was sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping 13-year-old Jamie Kloss and killing her parents. Kloss was held hostage for 88 days in a remote cabin before she escaped. In a statement read on her behalf today, she said he thought he could own her, but he was wrong. She was smarter. And this is a live look at New York from Fox 5, our affiliate there. One of the big stories there tonight, a tentative $44 million deal has reportedly been reached to settle lawsuits brought against the television and film company co-founded by Harvey Weinstein. Weinstein has been accused of sexual misconduct by scores of women and is facing criminal charges in New York for allegations of sexual violence against 2 women. He has denied all allegations of non-consensual sex. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. A lawsuit filed today is an attempt to block Alabama's new law that outlaws nearly all abortions. The American Civil Liberties Union and Planned Parenthood filed the lawsuit on behalf of abortion providers who could face up to 99 years in prison for performing the procedure in Alabama. That law has not taken effect yet, like similar laws passed in other states.